The bookstore. The first time I found the book, I was 18 years old and had nowhere to go. I'd left home that morning with a backpack, $40, and a bruise on my jaw that was already turning purple, my father's parting gift. I walked until I couldn't walk anymore, ending up in a part of the city I'd never seen, on a street I couldn't name, standing in front of a shop that looked like it had been there forever. HARLOW'S Books, the sign said. Gold letters on green wood, faded just enough to look antique without being unreadable. The window display was a tumble of old volumes, their spines facing outward like they were waiting to be chosen. I didn't mean to go in. I didn't have money for books, but the door was open, and the smell drifted out, paper and dust, and something warm underneath, like cinnamon or cloves, and my feet carried me inside before my brain could object. The shop was larger than it looked from the outside. Shelves stretched toward a ceiling I couldn't quite see, packed with books of every size and age. Sunlight filtered through windows that needed cleaning, casting everything in amber. And somewhere in the back, a kettle was whistling. "Be right with you," a voice called. I wandered, ran my fingers along spines without reading titles. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't know what I needed. I just knew I was lost in every way a person could be lost. And this place felt like the first safe harbor I'd found in 18 years. "You look like you could use some cocoa." I turned. The man standing behind the counter was old, really old, the kind of old where age stops meaning anything specific and just becomes a quality, like kindness or gravity. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a cardigan with leather patches on the elbows. He was holding 2 mugs, steam rising from both. "I don't have much money," I said. "Did I ask for money?" He held out one of the mugs. "Sit, drink. The books aren't going anywhere." I sat. I drank. The cocoa was perfect. Rich and dark, and exactly the temperature it needed to be. And for a few minutes, I didn't think about the bruise on my jaw, or the $40 in my pocket, or the fact that I had no plan, no future, no idea what I was supposed to do next. "Looking for something specific?" the old man asked. "I don't know what I'm looking for." He smiled. "Those are my favorite customers." The book was on a table near the back. I don't remember walking there, don't remember seeing it on the shelf or picking it up. One moment, I was finishing my cocoa. The next, I was standing in a shaft of dusty sunlight with a book in my hands. It was ordinary looking, brown leather cover, no title on the spine, pages yellowed with age. The kind of book you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. But when I opened it, the story was about a boy who ran away from home. Not literally me. The details were different. He lived in a village, not a city. His father was a drunk, not just cruel. He escaped by boat instead of by foot. But the feeling was the same. The terror and the relief, and the terrible freedom of having nothing left to lose. I stood there reading for what felt like hours. The boy in the book made his way to a new city, found work, failed, found work again, met people who helped him and people who hurt him, and slowly, chapter by chapter, built something that looked like a life. Somewhere in the middle, there was a passage that stopped me cold. He realized, standing in the ruins of his latest failure, that he had been waiting his whole life for permission. Permission to try, permission to want things, permission to believe he deserved more than what he'd been given. But permission was never going to come, and people who should have given it were the same people who had convinced him he didn't deserve it, and so he would have to give it to himself. Not because he had earned it, not because he was ready, but because no one else was going to, and waiting any longer meant dying without ever having lived. I closed the book. I was crying. I didn't know when I'd started. "Found something?" The old man was beside me, gentle, unhurried. "How much?" He looked at the book, looked at me. Something passed across his face. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "That one's not for sale, but I can lend it to you." He put his hand on my shoulder, light as a blessing. "Bring it back when you're done." I took the book. I left the shop. And over the next 2 weeks, sleeping in shelters and washing dishes for cash, I slowly figured out what kind of life I wanted to build. I read it 3 times, cover to cover. When I finally brought it back, the old man was exactly where I'd left him. Same cardigan, same glasses, same patient smile. "Thank you," I said. "Thank the book. I'm just the one who keeps the doors open." I walked out into a city that looked completely different than it had 2 weeks ago. Not because anything had changed, because I had. 23 years passed. I built the life the book had shown me was possible. Not the same life. I didn't escape by boat, didn't end up in a village, but the shape was right. The feeling was right. I got my GED, then a scholarship, then a degree. I became an engineer. I met a woman named Claire who laughed at my jokes and didn't flinch when I told her about my father. We got married in a small ceremony, bought a house, had the kind of life I'd never believed I was allowed to want. And then Claire got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4 by the time they found it. The doctors used words like aggressive and palliative and comfortable. And I sat in that office holding my wife's hand and felt everything I'd built over 23 years start to crumble. She died on a Tuesday in April. I held her hand until it went cold, and then I kept holding it, because letting go meant admitting she was gone, and I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. The funeral was small. The weeks after were smaller. I went to work because I didn't know what else to do. I came home to a house that still smelled like her perfume. I sat in the dark and tried to remember how I'd survived being lost before, and I couldn't. That's when I remembered the bookstore. It took me 3 days to find it, not because it had moved. It was exactly where I remembered, on a street I could finally name, in a part of the city I knew by heart now, but it was hidden in a way that defied logic. I walked past it twice before I saw it, like it only appeared when you stopped looking directly at it. HARLOW'S Books. The same sign, the same gold letters on green wood, the same smell drifting through the open door. I went in. The old man was behind the counter exactly as I remembered him. Same white hair, same wire-rimmed glasses, same cardigan with the leather patches. 23 years, and he hadn't aged a day. "Cocoa," he said. "Please." He made it the same way. Perfect temperature, rich and dark. I sat in the same chair I'd sat in as a terrified 18-year-old, and for a moment, the weight on my chest lifted just enough to let me breathe. "Looking for something specific?" he asked. "There was a book," I said, "the last time I was here. Brown leather, no title. It helped me." "Ah," he nodded slowly. "That one. Do you still have it?" He looked around the shop, at the shelves stretching toward the unseen ceiling, at the thousands of volumes packed into every available space. "It must be out with another reader. These things happen. Books find their way to the people who need them." "When will it be back?" "When it's finished being needed." He smiled, that same patient smile. "Check back. It always comes home eventually." I checked back. Once a week for the first month, then twice a week, then every day stopping in on my way home from work, drinking cocoa I didn't taste, searching shelves that never seemed to hold what I was looking for. "Not yet," the old man would say, "but soon. These things can't be rushed." I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, the book, the passage that had changed my life. Maybe it was just grief playing tricks on me. Maybe I was looking for magic because reality was too painful to accept. But I kept coming back, not for the book anymore, just for the cocoa, just for the quiet, just for the feeling of being in a place where time moved differently, where the weight of the world couldn't quite reach. And then I found the forums. It started with a Reddit thread. Someone had posted about a bookstore they'd visited years ago, a little shop that seemed to appear out of nowhere, run by an old man who never aged. They'd found a book there, brown leather, no title, that had changed their life, and now they couldn't find it again. The comments exploded. This happened to me too. The book was about a woman who left her husband. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I found it when I was 16. It was about a soldier coming home from war. I've never forgotten it. The old man gave me cocoa. He said the book wasn't for sale, but he'd lend it to me. I still think about it 20 years later. My book was about a mother who lost her child. I read it the week after my miscarriage. It saved my life. Hundreds of responses, thousands, people from different cities, different decades, different walks of life, all describing the same shop, the same old man, the same book. But the stories inside were completely different. Mine was set in medieval Japan. Mine was about astronauts. Mine was a love story. Mine was about grief. I scrolled through the comments for hours, my heart pounding. These people had all found the same book I had, the same impossible shape-shifting book that became exactly what each reader needed, and none of them could find it again. I stopped looking. Not consciously. I didn't make a decision. I just stopped. The bookstore was still there, still exactly where it had always been. But I stopped going in with expectations, stopped scanning the shelves, stopped asking the old man if the book had come back. I just sat, drank cocoa, let the quiet wash over me. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it was changing slowly from a wound into a scar, something I carried instead of something that carried me. Months passed. The anniversary of Claire's death came and went. I cleaned out her closet, finally, donated her clothes, kept a few things, her wedding ring, a scarf that still smelled like her, a photo from our honeymoon where she was laughing so hard her eyes were closed. I was okay. Not happy, not healed, but okay. Functional. Alive in a way that felt like more than just surviving. And then, my mother called. "Your father's dying." I hadn't spoken to her in 15 years, hadn't spoken to him in 23. I'd built my whole adult life around the absence of them, around the freedom of not being their son anymore. "James, are you there?" "I'm here." "The doctors say it's weeks, maybe days. He's asking for you." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. "I know what he did to you. I know I should have stopped it. But he's dying, James, and he's asking for you." I hung up. I sat in my empty house, in the chair where Claire used to read, and I felt 18 years old again, bruised, terrified, completely lost. I didn't make a conscious decision. My feet just carried me. The bookstore was warm. The old man looked up when I came in, took one look at my face, and started making cocoa without a word. I sat in my usual chair, wrapped my hands around the mug, didn't drink. "He's dying," I said. "My father, the one I ran away from. He's asking to see me." The old man nodded, didn't offer advice, didn't ask questions, just listened. "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I should. I spent my whole life getting away from him, and now he wants, what? Forgiveness? Closure? Some kind of absolution before he dies? What do you want?" The question stopped me. "I don't know." "Then perhaps," the old man said gently, "you should find out." He gestured toward the back of the shop, toward a table near the window, where a shaft of dusty sunlight fell across a single book. Brown leather cover, no title on the spine, pages yellowed with age. I stood up slowly, walked toward it like it might disappear if I moved too fast, picked it up with hands that were trembling. It was warm, heavier than I remembered. "How much?" I asked. "Some books aren't meant to be owned." The old man was beside me, gentle as ever. "But I can lend it to you. Bring it back when you're done." I took the book. I went home. I sat in Claire's chair and opened it with the same desperate hope I'd felt at 18. The story was about a man whose father was dying. Not literally me. The details were different. He was a fisherman, not an engineer. His father had been violent in different ways, left different scars. But the feeling was the same. The terror and the anger and the terrible weight of unfinished business. I read through the night. The fisherman wrestled with the same questions I was wrestling with. Should he go back? Did he owe his father anything? What did forgiveness even mean? And was it something you gave for the other person's sake or for your own? And somewhere near the end, there was a passage that made me stop breathing. He had spent his whole life running from a man who no longer existed. The father in his memories was frozen in time, always angry, always dangerous, always exactly as terrible as he had been on the worst day. But time had not frozen for anyone else. The man dying in that bed was not the man who had raised him. He was someone diminished, someone broken, someone who had lived with the consequences of what he'd done in ways his son had never seen. Forgiveness was not about saying it was okay. It was never okay. It would never be okay. Forgiveness was about setting down a weight he'd been carrying so long, he'd forgotten he was carrying it. Not for his father's sake, for his own. I closed the book. I bought a plane ticket. My father died 3 days after I arrived. I don't want to talk about what happened in that room. Some things are too private, too raw, too complicated for words. But I can tell you this. I didn't forgive him. Not in the way he wanted, not in any way that made what he did okay. But I said what I needed to say, and I listened to what he needed to say. And when he died, I was holding his hand. Not out of love exactly, but out of something I still don't have a name for, something that felt like release. I flew home. I sat in Claire's chair. I finished the book. The fisherman's story ended differently than mine, but it ended right. It ended the way it needed to. And then I took it back to the bookstore. The old man was behind the counter, exactly where I'd left him. "Finished?" he asked. "Finished." I handed him the book. He took it with the same care he'd shown 23 years ago, when I was a terrified kid with a bruise on my jaw and no idea who I was supposed to become. "Thank you," I said, again. "Thank the book. I just keep the doors open." I turned to leave, and that's when I saw her. A young woman, maybe 19 or 20. She was standing near the back of the shop, in a shaft of dusty sunlight, holding a book with a brown cover and no title on the spine. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She looked the way I must have looked all those years ago, lost in every way a person can be lost. She opened the book, and even from across the shop, I could see her face change, the tension in her shoulders easing, the fear in her eyes giving way to something else. Hope. I smiled. The old man caught my eye, nodded once, that same patient smile on his face. I walked out into a city that looked exactly the same as it always had, but I was different. Again. The bookstore is still there. I don't know how. I don't know why. I stopped asking those questions a long time ago. Some things don't need to be explained. Some magic doesn't need to be understood. All I know is this. If you're ever lost, really lost, lost in the ways that matter, you might find yourself on a street you don't recognize, standing in front of a shop that seems like it's always been there. Go in, drink the cocoa, let the old man lend you a book, and when you're done, bring it back. Someone else will need it. Someone always does.